Welcome to another episode of the David and Goliath Podcast. Here with my partner in crime, Stan Gipe. Stan, how's it going today, brother?
Pretty good.
We got ourselves an esteemed guest today.
Yeah, I was going to say we're pretty lucky today that we've got Joe Masterman with us. Matt, you can probably do a better introduction than I can.
I was prepared.
I just sum it up by saying I run into a lot of people in the legal circle. We do a lot of things. There's very few of them that sort of impress me quite as much as Joe does when it comes to his acumen, ability to sort of break down situations and really analyze legal topics. So that'll be my short introduction. I'll let you go a little deeper with it, Matt.
Yeah, no, Joe is far and away my brightest friend that I've ever had. And I think that Joe looks at us as charity and he's like, these two fucking morons I got to hang out with. But Joe, I'll give you a little history. Joe clerked for Justice Alito. And before that, clerked in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. Prior to that, graduated from Yale Law School. And just before that, as an undergrad, he was editor, I believe, of the Harvard Lampoon, which that's a pretty damn good resume. I don't have anything like that on my resume. So kudos to you, Joe. There's a whole bunch of topics to discuss with you. And I only have so much time today, but I want to jump in. Like, you started with the Harvard Lampoon. What was that like? Because there's so many famous alums that served on the Harvard Lampoon. That's such an amazing publication.
Well, thank you, Matt. And it was amazing to be on. But first, guys, you can't just invite me on here and embarrass me with this hagiography of my own resume. So I want to say, first, as a young lawyer, you have to Google statutes sometimes. You have to Google legal questions. And from 2017 until now, every time I would Google something, on the side would be Matt Dolman's face. And because you were just all over, and I would be sitting in my little office in DC, representing some state government, doing some sort of constitutional defense of its laws. And I would just see this guy, Matt Dolman. And I knew, I know that there are other types of lawyers out there, right? But the only other type of lawyer I knew was this guy, Matt Dolman, right? And you were just everywhere. You were a legend to me before I even met you. Then I meet you, and it turns out you are also an athletic star at the University of Miami. I grew up in Miami wearing a Santana Moss jersey until the number 6 fell off of the jersey. And little did I know, you ran track with all those guys.
Who ran after Moss? Who was the number 6 after Moss?
Number 6 was
Antrell
that.
Roll.
Yes, Antrell Roll, the great D-back. So,
I appreciate
you have also been in these, and Stan's okay too, and impresses me as well. But no, the Lampoon was a really unique experience. It's I don't know if you've ever Googled it, but it's this sort of triangular castle in the middle of the street in Cambridge, and it's sort of the most elitist Harvard thing you can imagine. It's associated with Harvard College. So it's actually when you get on, you get hazed like you would at any other secret society at Harvard. But all the other secret societies are not affiliated with Harvard technically. So when they are doing their month of effectively fraternity rush, they would do stuff they would make their initiates party all night. And then they would tell them at 7 a.m. the next morning, hey guys, we signed you all up for the SAT and you have to go get a certain score or else you're going to get cut, right? But the Lampoon, because it was associated with Harvard and subject to all the Massachusetts hazing laws, actually couldn't make the initiates drink. So they would do things like make us memorize a bunch of poems and stay up all night and then just recite them endlessly. And then, we did that, we got on, and then, you're just writing jokes in this magazine that all of the most famous comedians ever have gone through. And it's really humbling to do. And honestly, an incredible thing to just be a part of and to kind of, it was certainly the hardest, it's the silliest and hardest thing I've ever worked at until clerking. And so, it was cool. I know this has nothing to do with the law or what we're going to talk about, but it was a fun part of the life. And honestly, was kind of a good training for learning how to put things succinctly and communicate to audiences that you never know how they're going to react to what you say on the page. And so it was actually a good discipline for what I ended up doing.
Understood. You think you learned any skills from that served you now?
Like I said, being concise with the writing. I honestly humor is a good way of communicating. You guys know, you're trial lawyers, right? An easy way to get into someone's good graces and to actually get them to listen to you and want to respond to what you say is to try to disarm them by trying to be kind of funny, right? And so honing that, I'm not saying I am it's always dangerous to say I'm a funny person, because then people are going to be like, all right, well, tell me a joke, funny guy, but it's a useful sort of tactic to be able to communicate to people and to like, it's a package for getting whatever information you want to get to someone in a way that they'll receive it.
What's the selection process like with the Harvard Lampoon? Is it, I mean, I imagine just everybody who wants to work there can't. Like, do you submit written stuff? Is it a personal interview? Is it a good old boys network? Or how's it work?
It's purely blind and meritocratic. And so there is no social competition process. They last the semester. And you can try every semester until your senior year. And for that semester, they open up the castle twice a week. And you walk in, and the only room you're allowed in, if you're not a member, is this big wood-paneled, book-paneled circular library. And there are all of the current members of the staff are sitting in these like raised inset window seats in the library. All of the people who are trying to get on, and there's usually like 50 people who last the semester or something, or who keep going back. They bring, you spend whatever time you're not doing homework, trying to write comedy pieces. They're usually like page-long comedy narratives or dialogues or something like that. And you take your stuff in, you show it to the current staff members who are all sitting there looking very intimidating and very mean. And they never laugh, and they're all smoking. And none of them, like a lot of them actually don't smoke. And so they will actually exhale like these big white clouds rather than the sort of like thinner blue clouds if they were actually inhaling. That's a little too in the weeds, but they're all doing this to look scary. And you show them your stuff and they'll read it. And if they think a piece has promise, they'll say, look, like this joke works. Here's how I'd restructure this. If it doesn't work, they'll just say, thank you very much. Come back next time. And you do that for a semester, and they sort of weed out people over time. And as they're weeding people out, it gets kind of progressively crazier. One time you go, it'll just all be dark and candlelit, and you'll have to walk in, and everyone will just be like sitting there and not speaking, and you just like drop your stuff off, and then you leave, and then they come back and tell you, hey, you can come back again. And then, towards at the very end, they will come back and they'll tell you if you made it or not. If you don't make it, they'll give you back your packet with these like really nice, encouraging things. And they'll say, please try again next time. If you do make it, they'll give you back your packet. They'll tell you you didn't make it. You will then open your packet and you will see that they have like spit on it and like crushed a bunch of bugs on it and said, this is the worst shit ever. And then they will come back 10 minutes later and pound on your door. And then they don't let you sleep for a week. And you have to memorize all these poems and whatever. And you really get put through the ringer. So it's a real sort of cloak and dagger thing. But I was really appreciative that it was never about, and because you then end up with all these, like, it's a weird kind of society because you end up with all these people who chose to work really hard to be there. Right. And they have this incredible opportunity to inhabit this interesting space for as long as they're there. And then, all these famous people come back because they want to be there because there's all this history. And you end up with this really, to make an incredibly strained connection to our job is sort of like a steering committee for an MDL, right? It's like people who have like chosen to come together for this purpose and to work on this thing, which is the magazine. And you never expected to work with these people before. You don't have pre-existing relationships with them, but you all just kind of get along because, there you are.
Pretty cool. Did you make some lifelong friends from that?
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. A lot of people at my wedding party, me and Conan, text all the time.
I can't tell if you're being serious.
No, I'm not. No, it's no. Like I said, you sort of like keep this ingrained sort of deadpan sarcasm that you can never really get rid of. So no, my own wife never knows if I'm being serious or not.
No, I always find it to be very witty. Did you ever think about writing comedy afterwards, or is that something that still interests you?
It still interests me a little bit. Actually, as an early lawyer, when I was working at Cooper and Kirk with Chuck Cooper, who I know he was invited to present an argument at the Harmon Shakespeare Theater in DC. The Shakespeare Theater does this really cool thing where they will take a Shakespeare play and they will turn it into a mock trial. And I think they still do this every year. And ours was based on Richard III. And so Chuck argued against another like real appellate lawyer. And it's this sort of like it's supposed to be funny. It's this mock comedy trial based on the play, and we were representing the Crown, who, one of the other characters in the play was suing the Crown about something that had happened in the play. And you write a whole brief, and you're supposed to, make the brief funny, and then Chuck is supposed to get up there and give the argument. And the argument happened actually in front of Justice Alito and Justice Breyer and these other judges, and it was great. I mean, so I actually got to write like a fully like comedic brief. And it was that was probably the most fun I've had as a lawyer so far. Unfortunately, I couldn't bill for that time, but I still try to keep that a little bit. It's hard. We get busy, and you can only use comedy so much. But whenever I've had like bench trials or stuff like that, when I'm interviewing a witness on direct or cross, I'll look for little opportunities. I've been told that by my senior lawyers over time that maybe I push the envelope a little too much sometimes with like trying to get a witty repartee with an antagonistic witness. But you do what you can. I've never been censured, so.
Excellent. It's a high standard.
Yeah.
So then you got to law school. I mean, that's boring. You're obviously brilliant. And then you clerked for the Sixth Circuit, that's pretty exciting. And then Justice Alito, take us through that. Like, I've never clerked for a federal judge. What is that like? I mean, I understand the importance of it. I understand why that is considered so revered in the profession. What is it like? What do you do?
Well, I want to ask something too on this, because I sit here like when I was in law school, right? There was never a thought in my mind that there was a path from Stetson to clerking for a Supreme Court justice, right? When we were talking about what you were doing,
there wasn't a thought in your mind. There was no thought to anyone's mind that they were taking.
No, and when you were talking to like the counselors about what your plans were after school, no one was like, well, if you decide to go clerk for a Supreme Court justice, here's what you need to do, right? When is it like, how do you end up realizing you've got that kind of potential or that kind of analytical prowess that you might belong in that circle?
I mean, I never expected to until I got the call, honestly.
Yeah, Joe, what is it like to be smart? Tell us what that's like.
Oh, hey, you guys, come on. I mean, you guys know other smart people. Don't put me on the spot. Stan, it's something that, look, going to Harvard, going to Yale, I was incredibly fortunate in those experiences. And I was incredibly fortunate to be around all the other, 200 students in Yale Law School who were smarter than I was. And to have, to be against those peers every day, you're not against them, but, you're always working and doing your best, and there are limited spots for those kinds of things. And so I knew it was an option that people were pursuing, and I just tried to do the best I could in law school. And if it so happened that it was going to work out for me, then great. The kind of way it happened, I actually started out clerking on the Eastern District of Kentucky, actually, for Judge Tapar. And I spent a year there at the district court, on the federal district court. And that was incredibly informative, right? You're like, that's a lot more busy than the appeals court. You're dealing with motions every day. You really have to sort of like really get educated about how litigation really works very quickly. And you're working really hand in glove with the judge. And then my last day of my district court clerkship was actually the day that Judge Tapar got elevated to the Sixth Circuit. And so it was the day he got his commission to become an appeals judge. And appeals judges actually get one more clerk spot than district judges in the federal court system. So Judge Tapar had an extra spot left over. So I stayed actually for the summer as his fourth extra clerk. He let me work part-time while I was studying for the bar, which meant I worked from 9 to 6 and then studied the bar for the bar after that. Then I went to go clerk for Judge Kethledge, also on the Sixth Circuit. I was already planning on doing that. I went to go clerk for Judge Kethledge on the Sixth Circuit in Michigan. He is the most rigorous writer I have ever worked for. It was sort of like the Lampoon experience, honestly, only on steroids. He has this process where you bring your draft opinions to him. For people in the audience who don't know, clerks will basically kind of do whatever a judge needs them to do. And the most important thing they do is write first drafts of opinions. The judges, obviously, they read all the briefs that the parties submit and everything too. And the judges have final sign off and the final pen on all the opinions they issue. But the clerks will also digest all of the briefs. They will give the judges memos about how they think the cases should come out. The judges will then hear, if there's a hearing at the district court level, the judge will have, a summary judgment, motion to dismiss hearing, whatever. We also handle criminal matters, so there might be hearings on that. At the appeals level, a lot of cases reach argument before 3 judges of the Court of Appeals. And then when an opinion is assigned to that judge then has to write the opinion that will be the decision of the court. And the clerk who is assigned to that case will write a first draft of that opinion and bring it. I mean, every chamber works a little bit differently, but generally the clerk will write a first draft and you'll bring it to the judge, and together with the judge, we'll sort of work on it. And at some point, the opinion will then go to the judge, who will then, actually like turn it into his opinion or her opinion, and it'll be released. Usually that's every judge is different. And Judge Kethledge is like truly generous mentor. But his writing process, he himself calls it a sandblasting process, because you will get your opinion back from him, and he must have gone through like 2 pens worth of red ink, and just like everything. And like he expects you to have Strunk and White memorized, because a lot of his annotations are just like wrong C SW 17, like Strunk and White Rule 17. And so that was really a like grueling boot camp for learning how to write like a lawyer. And so in those 2 clerkships, Judge DePar, Judge Kethledge, they're younger judges, they're like in their 40s, 50s. So they're like super active. They like really are on the forefront of a lot of sort of legal, their opinions are, cited as really important in a lot of different legal areas. And I just got along with them really well. They've served as mentors for me the rest of my career. I still keep in touch with them, and they are continue to do, truly like thought leading work from the bench. And they encouraged me to apply for the Supreme Court. When you apply to the Supreme Court, you actually apply to all 9 justices, and whichever justices find your application interesting will invite you for an interview. Again, each interview process is different. Each one of the justices is a constitutionally appointed officer, so they can do kind of whatever they want in how they run their hiring process. And I was fortunate enough to get called for an interview with the justice. You go to the Supreme Court. They sit you down in I know I'm sort of rambling, but you asked. No. And I assume you can just
again. No one calls Sam and I for these opportunities. We want to know what's going on behind.
I'm fascinated.
You can edit it. Yeah, and please edit out whatever's boring. But so they call you to the Supreme Court to do your interview, and they sit you down in the marshal's office. The marshal is the court security officer. And they must do this. I've never had this confirmed, but they must do this on purpose. There's one like little bench in the waiting area of the marshal's office, and you sit down, and there's portraits of all 9 justices staring right back at you. And you're just sitting there and you're like, all right, okay, I get it. I'm in the presence here, and you walk through the halls, and the halls have the sort of official portrait of every single justice. I think by the time I was clerking, there had been like 108 justices or something. You walk past all of them who have ever served on the Supreme Court. And I got there and I thought, whatever happens, like I'm going to tell my kid about this experience. And that was honestly, I found that to be very gratifying, or honestly very like alleviating, because it's stressful, right? And I knew I was getting the interview about a month. I got the call for the interview about a month before it happened. I like read the Constitution every day before the interview. It's only 19 pages, so it wasn't that hard. But, I was just like, I was so naturally, you feel a little stressed about what's going to happen, because it's a sort of a life-changing opportunity. Sure. I got there and I just thought, you know what, like my life has changed no matter what. I got to come to this building. I got to sit here. I'm going to get to talk to Justice Alito. In these interview processes, the justices usually ask like, all right, well, do you have a question for me at the end of the interview process? And I just asked, look, like, in each of these, my tactic was always just to say like, I'm a young lawyer. I don't know what's going to happen. What advice do you have for a young lawyer? And I wanted to learn from these people, every time. I enjoy learning from people like this every time I get to be around them. And that continues to be the case. You go to like dinners with other lawyers and stuff. It's just and now I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, and you can probably count on one finger how many Justice Alito clerks do what I do. And so I get to run into a lot of different lawyers that other people from my background don't get to run into, you guys and everyone else we work with. Right. And I get to ask them like about their experiences, which are different from mine, but we have all like ended up in the same place, and they've all created a bunch of incredible lawyers that we all work with. Right. And so, my background, incredibly blessed, incredibly fortunate, incredibly good legal training. I again, look forward to telling my kids about it and having them live in awe of their father. But also, like, I'm here with all these people who have also worked their asses off in different ways. I mean, Stan, like, to go from the gutter wherever you were to come and to be in my presence must have taken an incredible amount of work. It's really amazing. And but you guys are like trial. You guys know trial. You guys know how to work with these clients, and you guys know stuff that I know. I just don't know because they don't teach you that at Yale. And so there's a lot of stuff that I like learned in a very specific way and did well in a very specific way that got me to the specific sort of brass rings that I was able to grasp and that I was fortunate to. But also it's given how humbling the experience is every step of the way. It also, like, if you allow yourself to be humbled by that experience, it also enables you to like keep learning from everyone you're fortunate enough to run into.
It's a great story. You've ever driven like a fast car before? You ever tried a fast car? You ever test driven a fast car?
Why do I talk fast?
You'll get to my point, but have you ever driven a fast car?
My stepdad for a while had a Corvette that he let me drive one time. I didn't crash it or anything. He just didn't like how I revved the engine too hard. So yes, I've
driven obviously slow cars too.
Yes, yeah.
When you're around Stan, do you feel like you're in a slow car? Like, does it seem different when you deal with mere mortals like Stan? Like, that's where I'm trying to land the plane here. Like, I always wonder. I get like self-conscious when I'm around Joe. Does Joe just like think, God, this guy's just not very. He's like kind of dim-witted. What's going on with this man?
Look, I mean, I'm sitting here in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I'm looking out at the street. There are some incredible like Mercedeses with these graphite wraps and incredible rims, and then there are some trucks that are bringing the bread to the bakery. And it takes all kinds.
So then after clerking for Alito, that's when you started at Cooper and Kirk, right?
So I actually worked for a year at Cooper and Kirk after clerking for Judge Kethledge, and then I clerked for Justice Alito, and then I went back to Cooper and Kirk. Cooper and Kirk has, it's a small Washington, small just in the size of the lawyers, Washington boutique litigation firm focused on, the sort of Washington-y stuff. So constitutional, administrative law. They have about 20 lawyers. A lot of them have clerked for the Supreme Court. And so it's sort of it was not unusual to leave for a year and go back. Chuck Cooper, who's the head of that firm, he referred to it as my sabbatical.
And Chuck's a Washington luminary. For those who don't know him, and I previously had Davis Cooper on this podcast, Joe's less intelligent partner. And I say that again lightly because Joe's brilliant himself, but his father's Chuck Cooper, who I guess he's one of the kingsmakers in the Republican Party for years. His law clerks were Senator Tom Cotton and Ted Cruz. I mean, that's an incredible place, incredible law firm, incredible establishment to start working for.
Yeah, I mean, Chuck's a legend and is still doing it. And the most amazing thing about Chuck, I mean, he is an acute intellect. As you know, you've gotten the chance to work with him as well. And but the amazing thing is, I mean, that firm doesn't shy away from taking on, potential political third rails. They are right of center. They do a lot of stuff in Washington. And if you're right of center in Washington, that is going to lead you into some, fraught political battles. But every single person Chuck has ever litigated against, as far as I'm aware, loves Chuck. He is just such an honorable person and really embodies the idea in American law that everyone deserves a lawyer. These are like reasonable minds can disagree, but these causes need to be hashed out, and they need to be hashed out at the highest levels. And when you're hashing them out at the highest levels, you need the best lawyers to do it so that these questions can be definitively decided in the best ways they can be.
Yeah, and again, I don't judge based on politics. I mean, listen, I fall on both sides of the aisle. Pretty much a moderate, a little bit conservative leanings, I guess, in some issues, but I get it. Like, you guys represented DeSantis against Disney. Like, what was that like? That is such a newsworthy story and such a polarizing story. What was it like to be on such a polarizing issue, be on that side of the issue?
So when I was clerking at the Supreme Court too, a lot of what we did was in the news. And it was a little, and that was really the first experience I had. I mean, we had some big cases at the district court and appellate court levels, but nothing where like it would be front page of the Wall Street Journal like it was in the Supreme Court. And, the first time that I was involved in one of those cases, whether clerking or in the Disney case, for example, it is a little surreal to see what you're working on reported on. And, every time that you really know an issue, and you read a report about it, you're like, well, they got that little detail wrong or whatever. And, you can sort of like, you're invested in the details. But you kind of just have to shut it out. You have to treat it as, all the noise out, because people are going to have whatever opinions they're going to have, and that's fine, and people are obviously entitled to their views, and certainly, not everyone has to have the same views. That's why we have an adversarial legal system to work all this out. But the working for state governments, we represent Florida at my new firm now too. Working for state governments is really a special opportunity because, your client has, every one of our clients is important, obviously, but when you're working for the state, their clients are their entire states and their entire populations. They need to do the best job they can, and they are really entrusted with making whatever policy decisions they have a mandate to make on behalf of their electorate. And it's really not my job to adjudicate what the people in Florida or whatever other state we represented are supposed to think about something. We got hired to represent the
I get that. Sure. I think most people with common sense understand that. You just have to represent your client. But, as we sit here now, you're on a couple of like really cutting edge projects. So you're on the steering committee in heavy metals and baby food, where the allegation is that there is such high levels of lead and arsenic in specific brands of baby food that led to neurodevelopmental disorders. I know you're leading some of the law and briefing there. And for those who don't understand that, that's the subcommittee of like the smartest people in the steering committee, and they put together the pleadings and forward-facing documents that go to the court. You're doing that right now in Roblox. Roblox is a really, I hate to use the word sexy project because we're talking about pedophilia and pedophiles and the predation of children. So I guess I would call it just incredibly newsworthy. And there's two cutting issues in this case, but namely the biggest issue besides Roblox shamelessly trying to force minor sexual abuse survivors into arbitration is Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act. And I know my understanding of 230, you can correct me, is it serves as kind of a sword and shield for internet platforms. They're not responsible for content posted by a third party. How does Roblox not fall under 230? Like, what's the argument here? And I know you can't get too granular because we're not trying to give away the secret sauce of what we're going to argue in this case, and you're at the the center of that. But what, for those people out there who think that this case is going to be blocked by 230, what is the avenue? How does that work?
Yeah, sure. And you're right that we're actively litigating it, so I'm not going to get too specific about litigation strategy or anything like that. But it's interesting that you correctly identified the name of the statute that Section 230 falls under, which is the Communications Decency Act. And actually, the operative language of Section 230 that really is supposed to or has been held to protect platforms is actually called Protection for, quote, Good Samaritan Blocking of Content. And why does that matter? That matters because our argument is not that Section 230 doesn't apply to Roblox at all. Of course, Section 230 protects Roblox from some types of lawsuits. And the whole point of Section 230, which was passed back in 30 years ago in 1997, was to say, these platforms that even back then were having a lot of traffic, they can't moderate or police everything that happens on those platforms, right? And so if I were to post on any of these platforms, so the one in there's this case that was the sort of first that Section 230 was a reaction to. It was called Stratton Oakmont, which was ironically the Jordan Belfort platform from Wolf of Wall Street, right? And so the concern there was, okay, so you have these big messaging platforms. What if I were to defame Stan Gipe on this platform, right? Should Stan be able to sue not only me, but also whatever platform I were to post that message on? And that comes down to a distinction between a publisher and a distributor. And what Section 230 basically does is to say these platforms that can't possibly police everything that happens on them, they're more like distributors. They're more like the newsstand, right? They're not like the newspaper, which chooses what goes into the newspaper. And the newspaper is the publisher. And back at sort of common law, or historically under the law, the publisher could actually be liable if I were to defame Stan in the newspaper, because the newspaper presumably saw what I wrote, said, yes, this should go in our op-ed page or whatever, and chose to publish it. So they can be equally liable for what I said as if they said it. What Section 230 does is to say, So say my defamation of Stan happened over Facebook, right? What Section 230 says is Facebook is not like the New York Times when Joe defamed Stan over Facebook. Facebook is more like the newsstand that just happened to distribute that is assumed not to actually know or to choose what goes in the newspapers that it sells. It's just the distributor, it's just the seller. The reason for that protection is actually, and this goes back to why it's called protection for Good Samaritan blocking, is that what they were concerned about back in the day was that actually Congress wanted these platforms to be free to act a little bit more like publishers and to say, actually, if we know that Joe is about to defame Stan over our platform, we're going to stop Joe from doing that. Or if Joe does defame Stan over our platform, we're going to take that message down. But that doesn't mean that the platform is assuming liability for all the other defamatory stuff that might happen just because they caught the one bad message that I happened to send over the platform. So Section 230 serves an important purpose and definitely applies to certain types of things that you may try to sue Roblox over. But that's just not our suit. Our suit is about the fact that Roblox, as we allege, designed its platform in a way that, Roblox doesn't have to read anything that happens on its platform. We're not saying that Roblox is liable because someone sent some bad message over the platform. We're saying that before any of that happened, Roblox chose to design its gaming platform in a way that makes it completely seamless for sex predators to find children. And that happens, and I know you've talked about Roblox on prior podcasts, but just sort of as a reminder, Roblox is this platform where you can go on and you can play games. And a lot of the sort of branding of the platform, what separates it is that you go on and the users actually create the games that other users play, right? And so you go on, you find what other users are doing. The problem is that Roblox has historically not done anything to verify who's coming on its platform. So I could be a 13-year-old girl and I could pretend to be an adult. I could be an adult. I could even be a registered sex offender and I could pretend to be a 13-year-old girl. It's as if, like in a real world playground, we somehow had this magic technology that enabled sex predators to transform their bodies to look like 13-year-olds and to interact with other 13-year-olds at the swing set and say, hey, you want to come be my girlfriend and come back to my house, right? That is what is happening because you interact as these digital avatars over Roblox. And we are just saying that that's a design defect because that is like below the bare minimum safety standards that have existed in the internet for 20 years. And even putting that aside, Roblox can't advertise itself as the digital playground if it knows this is happening. And it definitely knows this is happening. And it doesn't even, again, Roblox can know this is happening without even reading what's happening on its own platform. There have been multiple police investigations about this. There have been multiple huge reports about this that have been pointing out Roblox's pedophilia problem for years. And even putting all those claims aside, given that Roblox knows about this from all these other sources, they at least have to warn people, right? Like, at the end of the day, Roblox could, choose, say, yeah, we like being a pedophile hellscape, right? They can make that choice if they want to do that for their business. They just got to tell parents that that's what they are. They can't keep not warning parents about the dangers to the kids who go onto Roblox. And none of that should sound like anything I just said about what Section 230 does, right? Section 230 serves an important, narrow purpose that has nothing to do with design defect, has nothing to do with failure to warn, has nothing to do with negligent misrepresentations, right? Under the law, you have to look at what you're actually claiming. You have to look at what duty you're trying to impose on the platform based on your claim. And you have to look at what the platform has to do in order to fulfill the duty you're trying to impose on it. And in none of our claims, at least our general argument is, in none of our claims does Roblox actually have to police the content like it would be if our claim was you have to stop Joe from defaming Stan.
That was a great explanation. And yes, we've covered this with other people and no one did it as well. You go, Stan, sorry.
Now, I've got a question. It's nothing to do with where we're at, but kind of getting back to your clerking days, right? When you clerk for someone like Justice Alito, let's take it back, right? Like, you could knock me out, give me truth serum, extract every bit of information I have in my head, and the Dow Jones isn't moving. When you're working on an opinion for a judge like that, you've got information that truly the whole nation is interested in. You know these opinions before they're getting put out, right? And you're in the process of drafting them. What kind of training or do they do to kind of like, hey, watch out for this? People are going to try to exploit you. Like, they tell you, stay out of bars, stay away from strip clubs. Like, how do they like train you to help? Do they do anything to help like avoid accidentally letting massive information slip?
And do strippers often try to extract information from Supreme Court clerks? Like that I guess that's the question
Well,
on that slippery slope, Stan, that would lead to. Like, would they be smart enough
well,
and sophisticated enough to actually contemplate asking Joe what he learned when he had closed door sessions of other clerks about cutting edge issues that are going on in the United States? But yeah, go on.
look,
Oh, yeah, well,
there's only so many things that motivate people to lie: money, women, drugs, right? You
Yeah, but at
know,
least give him credit. You figure it would be a higher end escort, not like a stripper to local, like the C Squad in the middle of the afternoon that are putting down the McDonald's burger to get on the stage and ask
well,
then Joe what
it's
he
like,
knows
who
about.
was it that talked about investors? It's the three L's: ladies, liquor, and leverage. Right? It's one of those three that takes down every great man. So, you know,
well,
it's
fortunately, having spent a year at the Supreme Court, I watched the most amazing appellate advocates. So, like them, I'm only going to answer the parts of this compound question that I want to answer, not including the stripper parts. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Stan, they strike the fear of God in you about that, and you may recall that there was a rather famous leak of an opinion a couple of years ago, which happened after I clerked. So I'm sure that it's even different now. But yeah, I mean, it's even to the point where the sort of instructions you're given are, if you have a roommate, like you cannot tell your roommate which cases you're working on, because even that amount of information could be used, like you're saying, to glean some amount of information, right? If someone knows Joe is the clerk assigned to this case, I kind of know what Joe thinks, so I know what he's going to recommend to the justice, so I can sort of like glean from that some parcel of information about what might happen from the case, right? And so you can't say anything. It's like being in the CIA. I mean, I can tell people that I'm clerking for the Supreme Court, obviously, but if beyond that, you really can't say anything. And even prior clerks can tell you what happened their terms, because, you kind of need that institutional information to do your job. But once you're out of it, like the people clerking then can't even tell, or are not even supposed to tell former clerks of the same justice what's happening at the court.
like, are you allowed to bring materials home? Do you have to do you have to worry about that kind of security when you're working on an opinion?
Yeah, I mean the security is insane. Like I had never had to use one of those random number generator keys before, and but you have to like plug that in. You have to put in the number. In order to use a laptop at home, you got to plug that key in. You got to put the random number generator, the thing that pops up, and within 5 seconds, or else the number changes. So there's all these, locks and keys you got to go through just to access your own laptop for that reason.
Wow.
Yeah.
No one ever cared about anything that Stan and I knew. This is really cool.
Yeah.
All right.
To me, I feel like that would be almost a burden. Like, hey, I let something slip here when I'm talking to Matt or my wife or something. It's not like that. I would almost feel like that. Almost feel like an overwhelming burden you're carrying all the time. Like you got to be constantly careful that you don't share too much about anything when you're hanging out with your buddy at a bar, or just like loose lips sink ships, but especially more so in that situation. I think it'd be hard.
Yeah, I mean, even right now, there's still someone right behind my laptop screen pointing a gun at my head, just to make sure I don't say anything too much, even a few years later. Yeah.
Any other brain busters, Stan? What else you got?
No, that was the stuff that's really like plugs my mind. A little bit of a question, like, in the clerking job, like when you're clerking for a judge, do you almost have to train yourself a little bit to adopt his form of legal analysis or his legal voice? And does that take some time to learn?
Yeah, I mean, you are there to serve as kind of that judge's agent, right? And so you, in order to do the best job you can for them, you do kind of have to think, well, here's how I know they like to approach these types of cases. And, before beginning any three of the clerkships, I went through and I read all of that judge's published opinions from, as far back as I could, just to kind of get into the mode and in the style of that judge's reasoning. And it's never going to be perfect, and the honestly, the times that I feel like I did the most disservice to myself and wasted the judge's time or the boss's time was when I actually like tried to go too far and be like, oh, this is like a kind of, real gotcha or zinger that this judge might like, and that kind of stuff. You got to leave it to the experts. You just gotta get in there. You got to do your best job, just to kind of like process the information, give them what they need to help them do their job. But part of that is, you really, you can do that. You'll do that better if you can do it sort of in the mode that you think that they'll want to decide whatever type of case it is, and you learn that over time, right? I mean, you're working really closely with them for a whole year, so you get better and better at it.
So let me ask you, have you ever had to sit down and let's say you're in a judge, right? And he thinks completely differently about an issue than you and thinks it goes exactly the opposite of the way your intuition says it should. Have you had to sit down and draft an opinion like that? And if so, is that hard to sit there and draft the side of the argument you don't believe?
I don't know if it's hard, because that certainly happened, but it happens in cases, at least in my experience, it has happened in cases where it's a close call, and where I came out and I said, I just think it goes this way. And they often, a refrain in judges' chambers is they'll say, okay, see how it writes, and you will take a position, you'll write the opinion to see how it goes. And then once you actually have it written out, you can see, all right, well, and these people are really smart, and you'll give them your work product and you'll try to hide the flaws in your argument. And they'll like look at one clause in the paragraph and say, this is wrong. And then they'll point at the thing that really unravels the whole thing, right? Because they're incredibly logical and they're incredibly smart. And so it is hard, but it's only hard because the cases are hard, I would say. I did have one experience where the judge didn't think the case was hard, and it wasn't a controversial case or anything like that. It wasn't a Supreme Court case, but I thought it came out one way. I brought the draft, and the judge just once we had to talk about it, he was like, all right, well, Joe, I have one question. What planet are we on? And I was like, well, I guess I thought it was the one where this case comes out this way, but apparently not. And so I had to go back and redo it. But even there, these are the reason that cases get to the appeal and they become, cases that you actually end up spending time on is because there's possibilities for going one direction or the other. And the reason these people are judges is because they're good at making that call,
I mean, what percentage of cases are taken up by the Supreme Court? Less than 1%, right?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court's appellate jurisdiction is discretionary, so they get to choose most of the cases they hear. There's a small category of cases that fall under their original jurisdiction. So, for example, like if two states are suing each other over land or water use rights or something like that, they actually have to hear that case. But yeah, for the most part, they hear 70 to 90 cases a year, and those are all cases that they choose to hear, and they choose to hear them because they're the cases that they think need to be decided for the good of the rest of the country. Yeah, because of an obvious constitutional issue or a split between circuit courts, lower circuit appellate courts, right? Isn't it? They don't just take a case to take a case. No,
so these are very complex cases that get to this. My point is, these are the most complex of complex cases.
Yeah, they say that the Supreme Court doesn't really do error correction, as they say. It has to, like you said, it has to be an issue that other courts are divided about, and we need a single answer on, or it's a question that, maybe the courts aren't divided on it, but it's, like you said, a big constitutional issue, or maybe the government has done something really important, and the court needs to decide whether the government can keep doing it.
You are an interesting person. We've gone longer with you than any of our other guests. Which isn't saying much. We've had a low threshold so far, although we had Christy Fed and Alex Walsh on, but we did have your partner on, so we didn't have a high threshold for him. He didn't mention Yum Yum Sauce or his restaurant, which, by the way, I went to. So for those who don't know Davis Cooper owns a fast food hibachi restaurant in where is that? That's it was 10 minutes from where I was staying in Reston, Virginia.
Yeah.
What was that town called?
Nashville.
Okay, it was fantastic, by the way.
Yeah.
That was really, really good food, but Davis brings it up into every conversation, so
I can't. He's not even here. He's not even here, and I'm talking about Yum Yum. I can't believe this.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up. Is there any parting words or any passion projects you're working on right now besides Roblox and heavy metals and baby food?
Our firm is. I know you talked to Davis already, so I'm sure your listeners are all well familiar and have flocked to our website. But we're still pretty young. We're a couple of years into this. We're kind of unique in that we're still pretty lean and mean. And at least I am trying to bring something to this space that I saw a need for, which is, I hope I have some amount of, legal ability and learning from all of these experiences that I've just talked about. And, obviously we're trying to do a good job for our clients, but we're also trying to help the plaintiffs bar, right? I think that there is a lot of legal service that we can provide to other law firms, because as you guys know, I mean, it's not just law and order stuff. It's not just going to trial and having a cool cross-examination. There's a lot of stuff that happens before you get to trial. There's a lot of stuff that happens after you get to trial. And a lot of that stuff is very boring and involves sitting in a computer and doing stuff with Word documents. And, I can sometimes do a nice thing with a Word document, and I hope that we can continue to do that for whoever is trying to win summary judgment, has a verdict to protect, stuff like that. I mean, we're here to try to bring that kind of quality. And obviously other people are doing that. Keller's got a great firm, Gupta Wessler has a great firm, Lanier has a great appellate team, but we're trying to just come in and be an additional resource, because kind of like I said about, Chuck Cooper, he's an incredible lawyer and people love him because he really advocates for his clients, and he presents the best possible side of an issue that you possibly can. And I came to the plaintiff's bar as sort of an unusual member of the plaintiff's bar to try to provide the best possible arguments for the cases that we're involved in as we can, because we're going up against some of the most incredible lawyers on the other side, and they're doing a great job too. And they're giving the judges the best presentations of the issues that they possibly can for their clients, as they should. But we also need to give those judges the best presentations of the issues that we can at the motion to dismiss stage, at the Daubert phase, at summary judgment, at judgments notwithstanding the verdict, on appeal, maybe at the Supreme Court. We need to make sure that with issues like Section 230, we're going to run into all these complicated issues as business evolves and as it runs into more and more new and complex legal questions. And we're just here. I know this is getting a little salesy, but we're here to try to help where we can and where I can with those hard questions that are going to face our practice for the foreseeable future.
You're very humble. So, the word on the street from some of the top trial lawyers out there, who these people are. They think that you guys are the best brief writers in the whole country. So, and that's, these are some of the best lawyers in the country who are saying this. So there's a reason why you keep appearing on steering committee after steering committee. So kudos to your success. You guys are going places. I got nothing left. I mean, I can keep Joe on for another hour. You want to wrap it up? Do you have a Colin Joe story, or do you feel comfortable? I got to wrap at 5 o'clock though.
Yeah, I don't really have. I've only ever run into him at some stuff. He's too famous for me now.
Is he a cool guy or not really?
Yeah, he's a cool dude. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Stan, you want to wrap it up?
All right. Well, this has been another great edition of the David vs. Goliath podcast. We've had an extra entertaining guest today with Joe Masterman. As an attorney speaking to him, I find him to be just fascinating. I think everyone else out there does too. We're super lucky. Thanks, Joe, for coming on, taking the time to speak to us and entertain our somewhat lowbrow questions. But I really appreciate you taking the time.
I want to keep Joe in a cage and just study him. I find him so fascinating. He just has more most of my friends have nothing interesting to say. They're just they're friends. But
all right. All right. Stop making me blush. I know.
Just being honest. All right.
I always love talking to you guys. I've learned a lot from you guys. I really appreciate the chance to work together, and I look forward to keeping it up.
He's learned that there's a low barrier of entry into the plaintiff bar, and there's dopes like Matt and Stan making money. I mean, might as well go do this myself. All right, let's wrap this up. I appreciate you coming on today, Joe, and as always, Stan, it's a pleasure doing this with you. Have a great day, and God bless.
Thanks, guys.